everyone. Today we are in dialogue with the Gender Equality and Social Inclusion experts in Asian Disaster Preparedness Center. I'm Momota Hena. I'm a GESI coordinator working with ADPC. And with me I have today...
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ronilda, ADPC's Localization Program Manager.
So today we'll have this conversation on women and young people, empowerment, and their responses in disaster risk management in Asian Disaster Preparedness Center. So in this dialogue, let's start with our first question. So Ronilda, I have a question for you. So what do you think, what are the rights of women and girls still require urgent action in the face of disaster risk?
Okay, that's a good question to start with, Momota. And let me put first the premise to this question. Disasters are never gender neutral. Okay, they impact populations very differently, especially women and girls. Okay, and the rights that we need to look after are actually, I think, the following. The right to safety and protection against gender-based violence. This is very prevalent when disaster happens. When women are displaced, and when they do evacuations, when they go into shelters, whether that's temporary or long-term, resettlement sites. Okay, the increase for harassment, for neglect, abuse, are actually there for women. The second one is the right to health and reproductive services, whether that's from wash to menstrual hygiene, supplies, okay, to maternal and reproductive, care that's often lacking or impacted during disasters. The third one is economic rights and livelihoods. Many women are into informal, sectors, and therefore during disasters that's likely to get lost. Livelihoods are greatly impacted for women. Lastly, for me, it's the right to equal, participation and, of course, leadership for women. And for me, these rights are very important, that we need to actually, be gender responsive in our disaster planning, as well as inclusive, with all these disaster resilience initiatives we have.
Yeah, thank you for answering that. Go for the next question.
Yes, so let me just get to the next question, and I'd like to throw the next question to you. Do women and girls, have equal access to disaster information from your experience?
Yeah, Ronilda, I think I would like to continue with where your discussion actually ended, answer for that how communities need to come forward and community-related work is there. When we are talking about early warning systems or even information access, women and girls are always the one who are lacking behind. And I would also say women and girls in all their diversities. Even though we speak of inclusion, but when it comes to information and disaster risk related information to early warning systems or anything that we speak of, the inclusion is still not there. When we are talking about women and girls who are elderly or very young, who doesn't have access to digital technology, they are often not getting the information. If they are not speaking the mainstream language, if they are not from the mainstream community, if they are from religious, sexual minority or ethnic minorities, they're often the one who are not getting the information. So I don't think it's equal there. We are not there yet, but we are definitely working on it. And also working with people who are living with disabilities are also a big challenge that we often work with. And even though we are very passionate about it, the options are very limited, how to address sign language or many other options to be incorporated in the early warning systems. It still remains a challenge. Yeah, what do you think, Ronilda?
Yeah, I think you actually underscored three things. Mobility, access, as well, and I think the use of language, to have access to information.
Yeah. Yeah. So how can organizations such as ADPC can better support women and youth-led alliances? What do you think?
All right. I think ADPC as an international organization is very instrumental in involving, women and youth for resilience. One, as our mandate also includes, is to actually provide capacity building training, for women and youth to actually not only for technical, matters on disaster risk reduction, but rather also, to be inclusive in processes, to empower them, to empower them in terms of their leadership. The other thing is to create platforms for involvement, whether that's within ADPC itself, but also outside where our programs are implemented, to have actually mechanisms in the programs, in the projects that we have, to include, and not only include, but as well as provide platforms for leadership, for women especially. And of course, for the youth is to be able to give them also the platform for innovation. They're very good at that. Okay, and maybe some ways to do that is to give innovation grants for the youth to address probably problems on the inclusion, the lack of inclusion of women, of elderly, of youth. Maybe that's something that we can have a platform for the youth for innovation programs or projects.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I also think that as an organization, ADPC, which it already does, and we can also further improve in our work, that we sometimes take the back seat so that the young people and women can also come to the front row and work, take the leadership roles. And we also do that in our organization and in communities as well, that when we are working with the communities, we'll often like to take the back seat so that community can have a voice. And yeah, women and young people to have that leadership roles and having that experience of obviously not only builds but also shapes and reshapes how community is thinking and how we are actually being innovative and bringing different thoughts and perspectives in picture.
Yeah, thank you. Momota, what do you think currently are still the barriers, that prevent women from, participating or having meaningful, voice in disaster planning?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, but I think the biggest problem is the social and structural norms. No matter how hard we try, this is not something that we can actually change overnight. And this is not something that we are not working on, but this is something that progress is not as visible as we would like to see. It takes decades of centuries of work that women had been building on, so where we are today. But bringing women's voices in places, bringing them from the communities or where they have their own perspective of what their role should be in the communities and to what extent they can actually have their voice. And that's something that needs to be reshaped through time, education, empowerment, and it takes time. So I think end of the day the biggest challenge is the social and structural norm, but also systematically I think our work was also there that it's not always that women's role or their voices are a priority. So in that case that's also something that prevents women to be more in the voice of disaster risk preparedness.
Right, yeah. I think we've had decades and decades of work for women on, actually addressing structural, social norms and barriers, right? And that also includes, access to education, right? Access to technologies, and of course to networks, being in solidarity with other women who are actually working out there. Right?
Yeah, Ronilda. So in that case, how do you think that young people can actually influence the disaster risk preparedness or any other aspect that you have in your mind?
Yes, this brings me actually to my younger years, and I remember, in my younger years as well, one of the things that they always say about youth is, the ability, the capacity to be bold, right? There's less fear with the youth, and therefore I think that's something that the youth can bring, because with that they can actually bring awareness to people. The youth are very articulate, right? And also these days they're very adept, with technologies, with AI, with all this, technologies in terms of geospatial technologies and others. I think they can have an impact in terms of even of conversations and early warning and how to reach the ground. But one of the things I would really think bridge, the ability for technologies, the articulation, what I think is being grounded. And so I would encourage the youth to have volunteer works, really get to the ground, get involved with communities, listen, understand, because technologies alone, when they are not grounded, will not really solve the problems. They can actually create maladaptation for that matter. So in that regard, I think I'd encourage the youth. And also nowadays, you can see in different countries the youth being in positions of power, right? And that's why they need to be grounded, because if you are not, then you actually perpetuate, the insensitivity, the gender inequality, across different sectors, and also within institutions like government or others, where you could actually be making a difference, or the youth could actually be making a difference.
Yeah,
Right?
you're so right, Ronilda. But also to add with that, even though we talk about young people need to be more grounded, whenever there is a disaster taking place, we are talking about community mobilization or to the first responder, something, we always see that young people are coming forward at first. They really want to work, they really want to volunteer, the enthusiasm is there. So I think they're also looking forward to those kind of opportunities where they can actually work in the ground level and to learn. And yeah, I'm very pleased with the young people whenever they're working with the communities. It's just their good heart and the good intention that they come with all their energy to reshape the world in a better way. So yeah, I'm really impressed as well.
Yes, I think because, the young, as they start their lives, they look for meaning. And they're trying to say, where can I be involved? Where can I make a difference?
Yeah.
They want that. Yeah, so.
So we are almost in the end of our dialogue. So to end that, what is the last advice, what is the one piece of advice that you think you want to give to all the women and girls in all their diversities? What would be your advice?
All right. At first, I said that the premise was disasters are not gender neutral, right? I have the second premise as I end this or wrap it up, is that women are not simply affected by disasters. Women are meaningful leaders. For resilience, they can come and actually, be involved, in building. There are actually, it's just the recognition that we need to give and elevate that, that leadership. So for all women out there, reclaim your voice, okay, and take leadership in shaping risk reduction, resilience in the country, because it does matter. Your voice and leadership does matter in this conversation.
Yes, definitely. I also agree with that. I also actually have the same thing to say. For women and girls who are the main caregivers in the communities, and even if they are not there when they're in the house, when there's a disaster taking place, they are the first one to actually respond, and they're the last one to leave the house. So there is always this disparity is going to be there. But with women's voice in the decision-making table, their voice is to be heard. It actually makes the difference that how we are going to prepare for the risk preparedness and disaster-related work. This is very important that we hear from them. So thank you so much, Ronilda, for the dialogue.
Thank
so
you.
Happy to have this conversation with you, and we look forward to many more.
Thank you, Momota. Yes, this is a happy conversation. So it's a women's, it's International Women's Month. many, they say it's a day, but many actually, convert it into a month's celebration. So a pleasure.
Thank you.